Welcome to the show, people. I am talking once again to the wonderful Anthony Blake, and we thought we'd discuss the Enneagram again. We've talked about it before on previous shows, but it's always a subject that keeps coming back up. People are always asking me about it and always talking about how they've gone to find out what type they are on the number of the Enneagram. And I'm like, no, we do it the Gurdjieff way, not the New Age way. Because Gurdjieff said to Ouspensky, if we understood the Enneagram, we would understand everything. I'm paraphrasing here, really. But it's wonderful to be chatting again with you, Tony, and about this wonderful symbol. When we were planning this, I suddenly remembered Leonardo da Vinci's man, the
Vitruvius.
diagram he does of the man in the wheel.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
that's like an Enneagram, isn't it? Because it's two men. Well, it's one man, but he's got his arms up there and then his arms
It's
there.
really a pentad or pentacle. Never mind. Uh,
Do you think so? Oh, okay. Because I was looking at it. I've got one here, but you won't be able to see it because he's got the 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7. Because he's got two arms, hasn't he? One
yeah,
like straight and then one like that.
yeah, that's
And then
right.
with the feet like that down there, it kind of makes the Enneagram.
Yeah, you could make it fit. That's fine. Right. Yes, the Enneagram is obviously it's there for us to play with.
What are your new discoveries on it, or what was it that you wanted to talk about with it today?
Well, recently, just was the task was to make a new edition of my Enneagram book, and so I said some new things in it and to put that together. But in following this up, I found I had to look up various materials and sources, do some research and so on, and began to something I could always call new or interesting began to emerge out of doing that. So I wanted to bring that in, and it's into relationship to such things as Babylonian musical theory, and why the law of seven in particular, and it's also to do with my passionate interest in the structure of dramatic work and the way in which narrative is put together and that kind of thing. And it's also to do with the way in which I could see the Enneagram is foreshadowing, or that's my opinion, what was called in the 20th century cybernetics. And it was, in fact, quite an advanced form of thinking which became embodied in it. So, and then finally, the fourth ingredient would be my concern with other forms of the Enneagram, and which is always attracted me for some years now, and I like to try and communicate that to other people.
Oh, sounds fantastic. I'm very interested in the cybernetic parts. Would that be including perhaps the work of Fring? Because he wrote books about the coming cybernetics many
Who
years
did?
ago.
Who did?
Fring. I've forgotten. You
Meredith Ring?
Meredith Fring, yes.
Yeah, yeah, no, I don't know him as such. As I will be mentioning the leading figure of the 20th century, who was quite, and some people say he was an absolute genius, as Stafford Beer. He was an English cybernetician, very remarkable man, and there's a whole story to do with him and his involvement with Chile and the government there and the experiments he did. And there are other people like Heinrich von Forster, Gregory Bateson, and major figures of the 20th century, Ashby, who were inventing this new way of thinking, and was a very exciting time. But Thring, I thought, was more in the realm of ergonomics, machines, or robotics, or that kind of thing. But I should have never actually done. I should actually follow up and look into him.
Okay, well, I have his little books on that if you want them, so I can send them to you because they're
Thank
quite
you.
hard to get these days. But you are right, it is about robotics. And I suppose cybernetics perhaps was beginning to be discussed. I don't think artificial intelligence was around when he was writing this, but he was forewarning that we've got to be careful they don't take over the robots.
Ah, yes, indeed.
So can we go into the cybernetic side of it straight away, or did you want to build up to that?
Well, Well, since you say it, it's a challenge. I hadn't prepared in that way, but not that I do much preparation. So let's start off in that. The idea, one idea of cybernetics, the word comes in the Greek, and it's to do with steering, and the idea of self-steering. So steering is me guiding systems. So the idea had been around for some time, because the idea of steering and so on was very important as a general concept, besides actually driving ships and this kind of thing and so on. But there is, how do we do that? And major changes happened in the 19th century, particularly with machines which had to be regulated. And there was this wonderful device called a governor. A lovely word, the governor, isn't it? Which was the way in which a machine could be automatically controlled, so it wasn't too much fuel injected in it or too little. It had a way of having a feedback from how fast it was going to the supply of fuel. It never worked very well, but it established this idea that the machine could look after itself. Keep, in spite, variations and so on, it would take care of. And so that led to this looking for a notion of machines which could regulate themselves. So this was a notion of an internal communication, internal intelligence of some kind. It was like the forerunner of some idea of artificial intelligence. And it was, the actual, this began to get into people at a time when it was just before the time of getting the idea of the computer in this different sense. The word computer applied to people, particularly women who did calculations in the beginning of the 20th century. They came towards these machines, and people like Turing and Bletchley Park and so on, they created computers, and that began to influence people. And people like Norbert Wiener talked about this picture of these things, and how it was really around the question, how autonomous could they be? So we're used to a machine just doing what it's programmed to do and do this task. And it does that task, it can't do anything else. And I say, well, it could have a bit more flexibility to that and adjust to things that actually happen. Let's start with that basic picture with the Enneagram. You see, this was something which, Bennett caught hold of in 1960s or something. In the Enneagram, if you picture it, and we might have, the circle and the triangle and so on, the process going around the outside, so to speak, and the triangle pointing to things called shocks or interventions or communications to the outside world or the introduction of something new. And there's a notion of something coming in which was capable of correcting variations, correcting, I call it mistakes, if you like, but something like that. But this had to come in, and it's like a superior sort of guidance. Now that meant, and it was particularly to do with Bennett's idea of hazard. Seeing, it's the old adage: if things can go wrong, they go wrong. Sod's law, this kind of thing. So how far can you do it? Of course, if you have people, they're supposed to be able to look at what's happening and make corrections, but could the machine do it itself? Can you have it inbuilt? And does something like this happen in living systems and so on and so on? So all kinds of thoughts came up, which led to a concept about the 1970s of autopoiesis, which is where we auto self, poiesis means a word in poetry, but it also means production or making. So it means self-making. The idea that organisms, living systems, recreate themselves. See, and how is this possible? Then I thought, well, this really stands some kind of comparison with Gurdjieff's idea that the Enneagram should be about perpetual motion. If you stretch a point or doing it, and it's like, and every organism is part of an ecosystem, and this is part of a planetary system, and da. So it might be that we can think of it as a self-producing, self-making it, because an organism makes its own substance. It starts with a little thing, then it's got its own roots and leaves, roots which take nutrients from the soil, and the leaves that take energy from the sun, and doing all that. But it's built so it all comes out of that little seed somehow or other, you see. So there was that.
But it's not static, it's growing.
It is growing. Yes. So there was all of that. Now, the cybernetics developed this idea, which is almost like obvious, but I often comment on this and say, wish to God politicians knew a bit about cybernetics, because the way they behave is total lunacy. That is, they set up things like reforms and all the rest of it, and they do it on the basis usually of emotional appeal to what sounds good to people, with little awareness of being aware of the consequences of this. Now, in physics, there is this law, very, very important principle. People don't realize. If any system, whatever it is, and you put a force into it, then that system will of itself create a counterforce. This is the nature of things. In public affairs and so on, like politicians don't seem to be aware of this. They think they can just blast off to some direction because it feels good, it looks good, and it will get something. In fact, it's just usually turns out to be a disaster, nearly always, but people go on and on doing this. So cybernetics was quite challenging to people. To take into account, you have a system here, and you take into account how that system responds, you see. In the Enneagram, I translate this into what is called in that diagram the second octave. Now, he had, as you imagine, a figure, we get the triangle, and of course you get the idea of that going around the circle, but then there's this added touch to it. Okay, so you start descending in the circle, you come to that point 3 over there, and what happens, and I go into it in some detail in what I'm just writing now, but what happens there is like a process of iterates. It starts another process. And this process is like aware of the first process and is able to adjust it, is able to compensate for things going wrong and so on. It's a bit like, in the standard CD, you have not only the encoding of the music, so to speak, we also have coding which tests whether the coding is correct as a second order, kind of thing going in there. Now, so we got that notion of this layers and layers, and I must emphasize this simplistic idea in it. This is all getting away from this one-dimensional linear way of thinking which dominates nearly everywhere in the world, because his 3 octaves, as he called them, were corresponding to different levels. Then he could put it into little different energies, or even to different awareness, and which usually you don't get any allowance for in ordinary thought in the world. But they brought it in, and there was this lovely version of it done by a lovely man, Gregory Bateson. Don't know, he wrote this famous book on mind and nature, or Steps Towards an Ecology of Mind, in the 50s, 60s. He was married to the anthropologist Margaret Mead, and he talked about 3 loops of learning. You learn about how I want to get to A. So you can learn about getting to A and being sure you get to A. Now, the second thing comes in to question that and said, well, as you go along, perhaps you discover A isn't all that desirable. There could be a better A, you see. Why be stuck?
Higher A.
Yeah, well, nearly everywhere. Again, going back to the obvious extreme, the stupid Soviet 5-year plans, they start off somewhere, they keep on bashing at it and not adjust their targets and so on, whatever. They're stuck to it because they were an authoritarian state, a despotic state, and so they keep on hammering the same thing. And if people starved, they didn't care. But that's what it was. We have to change. As you come in, you get involved in something, you see, this is not what it's about at all. There's something more important or more valuable, you see. So that's the second where you begin to get learning about the goal itself, not how to get to go and go. Then what's the third? Yeah, so it's a bit more tricky. And it's about the way in which you handle the combination of, getting to the goal and questioning the goal. In other words, all to do with your system of thinking. And that's called a third loop of learning. See? So now I say these actually map very well onto Gurdjieff's 3 octaves.
Just going back to what you were just saying, a lot of people, like take them politicians, for example, they make this plan thinking, oh, this will work in a few years' time, but they don't see that things change over that time period, do they?
No.
And that's why these kind of things don't really work.
Exactly.
Where from our point of view, we are aware that things change as we've made our plans. They could go a little bit this way or a little bit that way.
Best laid plans of mice and men,
Exactly, yes.
Come unravel. This is all that thing in warfare. Was it I call it the strategy of the war, whatever it is lost with the first engagement. The very first engagement shows that you're missing the point. So
that's why people like us doing Gurdjieff work or any kind of path like this, you're being shown that always expect the unexpected and that things aren't, well, as you say, best laid plans don't work, but we've got to be able to be aware. We make ourselves aware that things change, where most people that don't do anything of this kind of work, the everyday politicians and such like, they think they have control of everything, where really we know we're living in a chaotic world.
Yes, exactly right. And still, so most people believe you've got a problem with their answers. It's like this. They're thinking lately of all the trouble with migrants and so on, because it's all set up in the political world for the politicians to pretend they know what to do about it. But nobody knows what to do about it.
No.
But they can't say that. They can't admit. Yeah. And so they invented things like Rwanda and so on, which the British government is doing, completely inhuman and stupid, because they have to show that they're trying their best or something to do something. But this thing takes us into this realm, of our contemporary experience. And so the cyberneticians did that too. And they had this other concern with all the different disciplines, wanting them to see what was underlying all of them, something in common with all of them. That was also one of their concerns. So let me talk briefly about the 3 octaves that I put about it. First, the idea of the octave Gurdjieff introduced is something very, very profound. And its obvious meaning is that do to do, and people think do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. That's an octave, and so on. This is more or less true in the Gurdjieff scheme, but it's much more than that. And so here I went into studies which have been done of the musical theory of 4,000 years ago. You see, when Gurdjieff was writing and so on, he may have had intimations of this, I think he did, but there wasn't the information around. All these massive clay tablets from Mesopotamia and so on, hundreds of thousands of them. But you remember, hardly anybody could translate them. It took a long time. It's only in very recent times that people have translated some of these things and shown. They had advanced, they had extraordinary mathematical skills, but also they had extraordinary musical theory.
Because it's something I wish I'd known back when I was a teenager, that they needed people to translate cuneiform. I would have loved to have gone to learn something like that.
Oh,
apparently there's only about 400 people in the world that can translate these tablets.
All of that. I suppose we can now only hope that AI can take this over.
Well, they have given it to the AI, haven't they? That's why there's more and more tablets coming out now, because the AI has been able to translate, obviously, at a much faster rate than us puny little humans and our little brains, organic brains. But that's why more and more Sumerian tablets and Akkadian tablets are going to start coming out over the next few years.
Because it's been a revelation. You see, it seems I felt that Gurdjieff was on the ball, and when he said that in ancient times they had some understanding of cosmic laws, and they put these particularly into music so it could be transmitted and so on. But anyway, that he drew attention to the significance of music in the way of understanding all kinds of things, and not just tunes or anything like that. But he didn't have the information, and I went back recently to All and Everything, his book, and he gets into this part of the Law of Seven, which got this fabulous name, Heptaparapparshinok, and he goes into this so-called history in China, and he's going to be right, the Chinese had musical theory, but for some reason, I just don't know why he does this. He completely inverts the historical facts. That is to say, he says, the Greeks only had a pentatonic scale based on 5, whereas the Chinese had a heptatonic scale based on 7. This is totally not true. It's absolutely the opposite. You know, I don't know why.
Oh, wow.
But a lot of it in there is very much to the point. And it is, you see how, you know, it struck me only through reading this material and absorbing it from many angles as best as I could. I began to appreciate as literally true that there's music, a musical theory, was the way in which people understood just about everything. Even they say the order of the planets, because, and I'll jump a little bit here, you know, have you ever thought about the days of the week?
Yes, Mondays, Tuesday, Wednesday, they're all named after planets.
Yeah, but why in that order?
Because of the way the planets are going around the ecliptic, isn't it?
No. It's quite different from that, actually. And in the early days, of course, they knew the 5 planets, visible planets, and the sun and the moon, making 7, you know, which is one of the reasons why 7 became very important, because of just 7 visible moving objects that day. And well, different periods, and I'm mixing up different, you know, to say a lot of ancient stuff did this, have these spheres, as they call it, because when we get to Pythagoras, you talk about the music of the spheres. At the time, they had the vision of the spheres, which were just round and round, corresponding to the moon and Saturn and Mars and Venus, and all these had their own sphere. You see, and that gave a certain order. Now, in the old order, which was, what do you call it, geocentric, the sun wasn't at the center at all. It was about the 4th in the series. So that you've got to remember, it wasn't empirically, it was just like that. But they didn't take the order of the planets in that way to give them the days of the week. What they did was to transform the order according to a certain pattern. Now, this is going to be really tricky, just talking without diagrams and numbers and so on, but maybe the numbers can be very challenging.
But this will encourage people to go and look it up even more for themselves.
Well, some of this is really fairly new stuff. I mean, this is extraordinary, because I was just recently astonished to find there was this number, I'm looking it up here, 4152637, which is absolutely important for ancient systems of music. And why? Because it's derived from the way in which our usual octave is created. Now, you probably know, I don't know if you do, it's something Gurdjieff never mentions, but absolutely central in ancient musical systems, is something called, would you understand the phrase, the cycle of fifths? Does that make any sense to you?
I do. I don't really comprehend music very well of how it's done in that kind of way, but I get the gist of it, but I wouldn't be able to explain it.
I know. You see, this is it's so important. A fifth is the from I won't attempt to sing it properly. It's from do to the note sol, and it's in the ratio of vibration of 3/2, and that's called a fifth because there's a fifth note in the octave, you see, and so it's called a fifth. Now, you keep on doing that 12 times. You say, upper fifth, upper fifth, upper fifth, upper fifth, upper fifth. It turns out to be to make almost precisely 7 octaves. Now, an octave, per se, is twice the frequency. So high do is twice the frequency of low do. So it's just 2 times. It's incredibly important, really. So, but it doesn't do it exactly. And people sweated about this. The difference is called the Pythagorean comma. And it's very small numbers, like I think it's something like 81/80 is a fraction or something like that. It's very small. Now, so you get all this 12 thing, right? And they were doing this 4,000 years ago, you know. And then you say, well, to make a musical scale, and this may be a bit tough to get, make a musical scale. You see, musical scale is within 1 octave, you know, from do to do, 1 octave, and it's got do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, whatever the bits are, the ones in between. That's the scale. And you know, one of the meanings of scale is actually ladder, because it has these connotations of being a ladder and so on. So, but you know, you do the cycle of fifths and they're spread out over 7 octaves, you know, like in a piano. Piano usually has 7 octaves on the keyboard. So what you do, what it is, you can always do this little trick, that is to bring it all into the 1 octave down below by skipping octaves, because there is this incredible thing. Now I'm going to hurt your ears, I say, if I go do, do, something like that. I was a bit flat, I think. But actually, you get the sense these 2 do's sound alike. So if you do, on the piano, you do the octave, you know, kind of thing, it sounds very easy, very harmonious. Of course, the most harmonious sound is the same note sounding with itself. So the next one is this one of the octave, that actually in Greek is called the diapason. And you feel it's almost the same. It's everybody recognizes this, you know. Now that identity holds the whole of music together. For example, you probably know, you picked it up, you like music. You play a melody in 1 octave, you can transpose it to a higher octave, and you still hear the same tune. Mm-hmm. But you know it's the same. And that similarity is what's produced through the number 2, the first and only even prime number, as a sacred number in its own way. Is the primal sacred feminine number of 2. And this governs that whole architecture. So what you could do is something up here on the keyboard, you can bring it down a certain number of times to fit. And so all these spread out, or some of them, can be brought into 1 octave. You see, that's how you make a scale. You start off doing the 5th things and you bring them into them. Now, and this is what people were doing easily 4,000 years ago. Yeah.
So will this lead to why the days are in a certain...
Yeah.
Are we coming to that?
Yeah.
I'm totally intrigued as to why the days are in a certain order now.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's to do with vibration of some kind.
No, it's to do, well, I won't be able to explain it exactly because I look at my notes, but the basic way in which this is done is that if you get, excuse me, the 7 notes of an octave you produce, and you make it, and there is an old tablet, it's just stunning to see this old tablet, thousands of years old, and the circle and inscribed as a heptagram, like that. Yeah. Now, what happens is that that's taken an order from the octave outside, but then you follow it inside, you see. Now, suddenly, just look at that with respect to the Enneagram. These 2 versions. the hexatic inner cycle, you see in the outside circle, is very reminiscent of this. And so you do this in a certain way, and you come out with the planets, which starts off in that they're arranged in a logical way in speed. So the moon is first because it appears fastest, and Saturn is last because it takes 30 years to go on its cycle, you see, and the moon is just a day or something. I've forgotten what it is. And you can put it in that order, and the order is broken up by applying the structure of the musical octave to it, so it comes out in this different way. And so it comes out. So you get the sun, the moon, and Tuesday is comes from, you know, in our language it comes from usually the Anglo-Saxon. So it's like Thursday is Thor's day. It comes from Thor, you see, and in French,
Friday's Freya's day.
That's right. That's right. I've forgotten what it is in Old Latin. There are all kinds of variations on it, but they all come from the same thing. Associate a planet with a god, and it has a certain name to it, and so we are. But the order of them is done in that way. Now, a lot of details I'm leaving out, partly because I can't easily summon them up and explain it, but how did it was important. But the history of this is intense. It's that this was known as, say, 4,000 years ago, this kind of thing, this order of things, which they then applied to everything, because it wasn't that music was one example of these laws, but it was the pattern for them all. They actually believed this was, so Gurdjieff was right. It was actually, it wasn't really describing actual music. It was a principle of mathematics, how to do it in terms of abstract principles. And over the years, it got applied in different ways to actual music, but it was a very complicated affair.
Yeah, because it's used in lots of things, even, you know, like our Gothic architecture is made on this this rhythm, isn't it? On the music and the numbers is why we get these wonderful Gothic cathedrals.
It was pretty universal. And what happened was, it's so interesting historically, there was this period, when was it? I think it's the 5th or 6th century BC. Yeah, yes, 520, 6th century BC, when the Jews were taken to captivity, not into Egypt, of course, which is just a pure myth which the Jews invented, but to Babylon.
Babylon, yeah.
You know, this incredible gathering. And so they had all these people there. And it was a mixture of cultures. And it was then the Jews picked up the 7-day week, which is, you know, if you think about why 7 days? And they say, well, contingently, it happened to be 7 so-called visible planets, but there's more to it than that. It was to do with this musical background. I think the Jews were foremost in adopting the sevenfold week, and now we find it's everywhere, just about everywhere in the world, the 7 days. You think, why? You know, if you really ask me why, you've got the 2 ways. Why 7? You know, and why in that order? And it all goes back to the Sumerians in Mesopotamia. They thought of it first, you see. Yeah. Wow.
I've just bought myself a book on the Sumerian gods, so I wish I'd read it before we'd done this show, but
oh, right.
I'll have to catch up.
Because everything was linked with number. Of course, all the gods had their number. Like Anu, the main god, was given the number 60 or the number 1, depends, because they had a number based on 60. If you count like this, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and right up, and you don't change your digit until you get to 60. And you think that's a bit difficult, but they also had a 10 and a 5 and sometimes a 12 way of breaking it up. But this 60 term thing has affected us in many ways, because it's from them again, the same people we get. really about the 12 applying to the day, because it's the 2 times 12 hours of a day, the 24. Why 24 hours? Why in 12s? You see, again, just completely arbitrary, but it's not, because it had a meaning. And the meaning so often came back to music.
Where would 60 come into music? I don't quite understand that.
Well, not in music, no, it doesn't.
All right, okay.
No, just
Maybe I'm trying to.
there are all these different number bases, which is part of what I'm writing about in the book. Is that you shouldn't assume that 10 is the only one. But say we Brits know about 12, the imperial scale, so to speak, and the French Godinum, who tried to do it in terms of, they did it in decimal, it was in terms of 10. So they tried to create a 10-day week, but it didn't work, And then you get schemes based on 5 and also binary. Now everybody does binary, 1 and 0. You see, that's a number base. You don't write any number down as another digit. You write them in 1s and 0s. That's all you use, and you can write down any number. You see, that's a different number base. Now, that affects how you do arithmetic. It depends on the number base you're doing. That famous number Gurdjieff has, 142857, comes from 1/7, but only in the decimal number base. You change the number base, it doesn't come out like that at all. It has to be 10.
Does it? I thought it always came to a 9.
What came to
the 142857 had a link to the number 9.
Well, it was number 9 because it's in the Enneagram, but it's 9 in the sense that if you go across the Enneagram and you just put the numbers down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on, then you get, of course, looking across, you got 8 and 1 make 9, 7 and 2 make 9, 6 make 9, 4 and 5 make 9. That's where the 9 comes in.
Oh, okay.
And also when you go through all these fractions, 1/7, 2/7, 3/7, 4/7, they all repeat the digits 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, different order, except the ninth, the one at the end, which comes out as 9999.9999, because that's at the very end. And that's very important too, but we'll leave it aside to one moment. So there you are. Now you see this, and imagine I'm trying to catch up with all of this, thinking, well, number of things I introduced. I'm going to go back to the octaves. You see, why have 3 octaves? Now, a reason like this, Gurdjieff was very strong on the law of 7 as being an octave.
Yep, I agree.
But then you look into it, what he meant was his octave was do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, with 2 semitones in those places, you see. And I've often puzzled about this because it's only true of the chord of C major. It's not true of other scales. In other scales, it's not true.
I'm not musically minded. Well, I am. I love my music, but I don't understand the.
Well, the tonics of passing. I'm video can't sing. You do re mi fa. The thing from mi to fa is a different size from re to mi.
Yes, yeah, I get all that bit. Yeah.
That's because it's a semitone, and the same from C to do, C, do, whatever. I can't even sing it properly. But you see, now this only applies to that particular octave, because there were always, the Greeks had at least 6 different scales where those intervals, those semitones appear, and they appear somewhere else. So for whatever reason, he just picks on that one out of several available schemes, which is the most favored one because the key of C major is pretty much liked and is used throughout the world. And so it's a common reference point, and everybody knows do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, and so you can get it. But
can I just check? So it wouldn't work in the G scale. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I get what you're saying now.
Yeah. Because that's part of why you get a different quality of different scales, you see, because there's that difference. And so the meaning of the notes changes from where they are. Well, it's very exciting. Yeah. So we go. So there we go. So Mr. G has it. We got our nice little circle, and people go up, do at the top, do, re, mi. Then number 3 appears, and it goes on to fa. You see, and that's fine. Now, and everybody says, "Oh, it's great. This where 3 is this where this shock comes in."
People debate that though.
They do,
but no.
But
let me just plug in. No, I have power now. Right, yeah. Right, so far, we got to far, and that's when the shock comes in.
Yeah, but you say people... I don't know if they ever... I didn't know about that debate. But then, you see, you go along the Enneagram, you see, we come to this 0.6. What's the 0.6 doing there? After Sol, before La. It goes in at that scale he chose anyway. There is no special interval between Sol and La. And so I thought about this. I thought, tut, Mr. G, naughty, naughty, naughty. How do you fudge this? And he was clever, you see. What he did was, and I think this is where he invented it, he said, aha, let us talk about, at 0.3, another octave starting. You see, that's the solution. It goes round there. And so at 0.6, you do get interval, but it's mi, fa, on another octave.
On the other, yeah, because someone explained to me, look at it, you've got an Enneagram here going round, then you've got, when it gets to fa, think of it on top of it going round.
And then on top of it. Exactly, you see. But this is, you could treat this as a glorious fudge. Yeah.
People are saying that he did. I've had people on my channel saying, Gurdjieff made a mistake. But I didn't know how to explain it to them. But anyway.
It's not
he didn't make a mistake. It's what you're saying. It's exactly that. He had another one start because, as you say, it's perpetual motion. It's always moving, and then it's starting again, making another round, and then it starts again on top of that, making another round. As a way of describing it.
No, it's very good. Now you see. Then that I thought this gave a kind of meaning to that triangle. You see the 0, 3, 6, or however you, because each of those points 0, 3, 6 and now are accorded their own starting point for an octave. And I suddenly thought, so I can't explain it very well. I felt this was really law conformable in some sort of way, because what is that triangle, you see? It's the way in which there is sort of intervention. This is the way I describe it. Not necessarily true or anything flashy like that, but it's like that there's a kind of, that's a law there, or a form which enters into the temporal sequence at those points. And at each of these points, it starts again as a repetition, you see, of the whole thing. So something like that, which I haven't explained too well, begins to make sense to me. And this is what happens. It's where, and later on I'll come to the significance of this in my feeling in mythological terms, you get this, you see the points of the triangle are like, picture of physically breaking the circle, cutting into the circle. It's an interrupt there, and it means that there's a start of something new. And the start of something new. And what are they? They're echoing. Now, let's get that sort of picture set. That's the only thing I've come across myself, which is sort of really, well, it's partly his explanation still, but I think I tried to bring it into a much more rational scheme. But you said about he cheated or got it wrong and so on. It's like, I would say the Enneagram, like there was some similar systems, and be used by artists. It's not at all a matter of a scientific formula. It really is not. People try to make it so. I think it's a mistake.
No, because it's a higher form of thinking, feeling, and willing. It's higher than science.
We hope so.
Because people are trying to put secular, materialistic way of thinking onto these things when we
Yes,
need
I
to
think
think
so.
in a
Yes.
different way.
But I also wanted to say, in my way of trying to present things, this, because I'm thinking about the whole scene about the Enneagram, and those carefully, I was repeat. I'm thinking about the Enneagram as a specific diagram that Gurdjieff and his friends created. Now, other people talk about the Enneagram in a most vague, amorphous way. It was some kind of understanding of, I don't know, rhythm, cosmos, or whatever it is. But I know that specific diagram, you see, has never been found anywhere else.
Anywhere else? No, because I spoke to you about how I thought Athanasius Kircher had done an Enneagram. But
Yeah.
what he's actually done is three triangles interwoven, but it is kind of like an Enneagram.
Well,
It's the same points in the
you
same places.
begin to stretch your point too much. Then you see
Yeah.
anything which got
Yes.
9 in, you think, well, like Oscar Chazo started doing. Oh, by the way, just his scheme, I don't really totally knock it. It's very, very interesting. But I haven't come across anywhere where he reveals or shows where he got the 9 from. You see, there's something about the Enneagram, though, that you can actually show fairly precisely where everything came from, you know. But his is so it's mysterious, and you pick it up. And then since you picked it up, it's in your brain and it determines you. Anyway, back to Mr. Gurdjieff. I wanted to make the scenario that he talks about that to Denis Sorat. He says, I and some friends, he says, looked at ancient material, studied it very well, and thought it was too abstract. And so he thought to bring in, and what did they bring in? They said, which is the knowledge of the West, is technical exactitude and so on. And he then declares that thing about combining the two sides. That's why he came to Europe and so on. But it is this group of men, and I say probably like all groups of men and women, you know, from all throughout history, we've got something between their ears, you know, intelligence and so on, design, and they like to create something of their own and do things, but it is created with an intention, a purpose, and we can look at what is the purpose. So I look at the various features of the Enneagram and say, why did he put it there? For what purpose? I call it a device. It's a device for enabling you to think in a certain way. So he's very cunning. What did he? And I say, he made it all up. That's fine by me.
I'm going, no.
But people love this. Oh, it's an ancient mystery and blah, blah, blah. Why? Because it means, no, literally, I say it means they can just stop thinking and just wave their hands and go mystical, you know, ancient, blah, blah, blah. That's all.
Well, I've said this to you before. I think it was part of the ancient mystery schools, but they only let out certain bits at a time. And that's why the Enneagram was never released before. And
That's
Athanasius Kircher visited a lot of apparently mystery schools. So that's maybe where he picked up his version. But
who picks
it
up,
never caught on.
who did?
Athanasius Kircher.
Oh, okay, all that. Yeah, that's the way Gurdjieff describes it too. But it is, you can look at it in various other ways, and I'll try and mention them in passing them. But let's go back to this figure, you see, where we've got, well, what was the starting point? The starting point was actually a major assumption, a radical assumption. And I compare it to a mathematical system where you have axioms. There's 2 axioms with the law 3 and the law 7. He never really justifies why those 2, but people feel, and I think quite right, that there's some kind of rationale about connecting the 2, and I point to one reason for their connection together. But once he's got that, he said he's going to combine. Let's combine these 2 in one diagram. See, that's nice. That's okay. I can understand that. You know. So, what does he do? And the psychological background to this, which I usually bring at this point, is to cite the analog of three-dimensional vision. No, so look at you. No, now you look at me. You've got two separate two-dimensional pictures, which your brain somehow managed to put into three. Wow. So I've taken that very seriously as an analog. So these two laws, he set it up in the way, the point of understanding is when these, so to speak, fuse in your mind and cooperate at the same time. And he's enabled you to do this. And that's connects with why people like Bennett and other people have said the Enneagram is really, it moves. You see it as a static thing moves. And why Gurdjieff put it into movements and emphasized movements and so on. What is this? Maybe marketing or whatever it is, but it's very serious. Yeah, that it is. And see, when people, as my friend Dick Knowles just now, he just showed me, so he had a friend do a, what do you call it, 3D print of the Enneagram with the different figures, the different layers. It's very pretty, you see, but I think it really misses the point. In putting into the two dimensions, you're forced to attempt the fusion of these two laws. Now, the law of three is fairly acceptable to most people. Everybody finds it easy to think in threes, including, I think, Oscar Chazo, because he based his whole system around threes. But seven is very, very different in its character. And notice that as far as I know, still, Chazo in his scheme doesn't really discriminate between the three of the triangle, 3, 6, 9, and the other 6. He just treats them as much of a muchness. He doesn't give the three any special significance, whereas in Gurdjieff it was major. Mm-hmm. So I won't go more into what Oscar Chazo might have been up to, because I don't really know.
Well, I've recently got a couple of his books because someone said to me, "Oh, you must read these." So I got them on the Enneagram. He doesn't mention Gurdjieff at all, and they do come across as if he invented the Enneagram. But maybe that's my own reading of it.
No, he does.
Right. Okay. Because I could see how he was putting it to other symbols and to mandalas and things like that. And mandalas also are moving, but they don't last. Like mandala, you're supposed to meditate on one and then destroy it. Yeah. Because it should be going into you. And I see what he's trying to say, because I used to think that about the Enneagram, even though it's moving, we're still trying to digest it inside ourselves to make the law of 3 and the law of 7 come together within us. It should be there to help us. Like we should be meditating, not necessarily meditating on it.
But does he bring in anything really about the law of 7?
Who? The other guy? No, Oscar, whatever his name is.
Oscar Chazo.
No, he doesn't.
That's way. You see, it doesn't. It's something like, it drives me crazy, And most people who pick it up and use it ignore most of its content and just use a bit of it. But let's come back to the idea of the fusion of the two. It's very exciting. It's quite an exciting challenge, you see, and I noticed, two things. Well, there is some background material on why 3 and 7 should be associated together, and this is only background material, suggestive. It doesn't prove anything at all. But the thing I bear in mind is that 3 plus 7 equals 10. Mm-hmm. You see, and I think it is very significant because of the importance of the number base for all the calculations. So, what do? We get a law of 3. I think I try to picture the most naive approaches. We've got the circle, and everybody say, "Okay, this is the whole thing," blah blah blah, and you can have it's both there spatially and time-wise, going round. I think, well, what do? You put it as dividing the whole as the first way. So the first way, you divide the whole into 3. And so that's why you get the triangle, you see, which divides it into 3. And I say, Does it prove anything? No, but it seems to be fairly straightforward, you see. Now, 3 and 7 are, prime numbers. So if you do it again and you, like in the triad, you get these fractions which are 1/3, 2/3, and 3/3 corresponding to the points 3, 6, 9. You do with the 7, get this weird number, 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7. But that's the numbers which are not used for the triangle. 3 and 6 are not used in that, you see, because they don't. So then you see, this is very interesting, because around the circle, what is actually shown and done is a sort of interweaving of the 3 and the 7 in terms of their points. You've got 3 there, and in between he puts the 7, you see. But also, one must notice that they have a unity at the top point. The law 3 has a point there, and law 7 has a point there, you see. And also, it's a very powerful thing, because then you see, it's the beginning and the end, it's 0 and 9. It's the return into itself and so on. So that top point becomes in my writing, I've been waffling about that as the intensive point of the Enneagram, where it's all enfolded into that one top point and it begins to unfold. And Gurdjieff does this a bit, where he talks about in the triangle, it's like the top is unity and the bottom across is multiplicity. So it's unity and multiplicity, and that's expressed in there. And I've given it myself, it's what do I call it? Oh, yes. We worked with a friend, Sigurd Andersen, on this, and we kind of agreed to call this first law, I call it just for the informing law, because it puts the form, gives it form. Now I'm going to jump to a quite different kind of example, to Aristotle and the Poetics, and his view on drama. He said that it's beginning, a middle, and an end. And you think, this is so obvious, it's not worth saying. But it's not. It's incredible. It's laid the whole basis for thinking about historical drama structure for thousands of years, But you can see it then in that triangle. Now, when it came to examples of the Enneagram, and I put in my first book, the Enneagram, I began to call that triangle the Logos. Really from Heraclitus, who said the Logos is that through which we understand, and he waxes poetical about the Logos. And I thought, why? Because it's informing the whole process, you see. But and I'll come back to drama in a minute to illustrate the Logos. It is, actually showing this remarkable thing of that the Logos, and I identify at one point with will, a sense of law and command, and something putting the form in. You see, time as such is just one bloody thing after another. You see, what makes it not that, what makes it significant, is when you break it into a structure. Now, what about the 7? Well, this is associated with such things as sequence, and Gurdjieff's idea of form and sequence. In a way, the law of 3 is form, and law of 7 is sequence. The sequence is like octaves, do one thing building another. It's a ladder. You see, it's a sequence. And indeed, of course, the etymology of the word week is associated with the word sequence. No, ladder. Oh, sequence. Sorry, so it's week sequence. Walk in German is like sequence. So then you begin to think, aha. And other words like that. So I began to call it the second one, the unfolding system. So you have the informing and the unfolding. And just these are metaphorical names, you see. But this is to say, and you expect then to find the points of the two systems equally spread out around the circle, but in a very symmetrical way. So you get, the 2 there and 2 at the bottom and 2 at the side. Very symmetrical. You see. That's to do with law 7. And so I think, well, this is really, really quite interesting. Now, How are you doing?
No, I'm fine. I was thinking when you remember when you were saying about the point at the top.
Yeah.
Well, I'd always thought of that. Is that his way of saying the Ouroboros? The snake eating itself because
Oh
everything's
yeah, yeah,
continuing.
exactly the same. Yes, exactly that.
Mm.
Uh, and because I bring in modern ideas like Bohm about that, because there you get what we call the implicate order, in a sense, a hidden order, and then what it shows around the rest of the Enneagram is the explicate order. It's like bringing it out and showing it and revealing it, and I rather like that way of looking at it. So it's all really at the top point, you see, and you can notice then, well, I would say, okay, top point, then it explodes and produces these two arms to it, you see. And they go on and they produce then the 7 arms and this kind of thing. So begin to see it unfolding. Now, let us go to, well, a sort of examples, because I'm jumping into the things I said I would do around. And that's my really passionate about drama, because that in the intelligent animal I began to do this, and I was just so amazed nobody else had ever seemed to do it. I mean, the first temptation of even Enneagram is to start wiseacring about spiritual matters, which I think is usually a waste of time.
Ooh,
Then
outrageous.
no, I want to say, show me something concrete, and something, like that's why I love Bennett's basic love, the kitchen, cooking food, something and literally get your teeth into, something tangible, so that you can test and see in your own experience and this kind of thing. So then I began to see particularly movies, because I love movies, and I said, because I did go to this wonderful seminar by a man called McKee on writing, for screen script writing and plots and so on. He was very traditional, but it's lovely hearing him talk about this and, the actual structural things and the kind of dynamics inside them and so on. And I picked that up. And so I began to look at these. So I'll take the particular example. I'm going to try it out again in next month. So I'm in Claremont, hopefully doing a seminar on theatre. I took one of the greatest masterpieces of all time, which is Oedipus Rex.
Okay, yeah.
Which is taken to be about the most accomplished tragedy of all time, just perfectly composed. Now, of course, you see what you see around the outside. Basically, the happenstance of the poor main character, Oedipus. He starts off being this wonderful king of thieves and ends up being sent into exile blind. And that's him. And it's, all these dramas, I found this out, take this outer ring as the world of ordinary life, just one thing after another. And this picture of us people as just stumbling from one event to the next, blindly. And certainly, you say, something from another dimensional source, which brings a possible form into this. Now, in Greek drama, this is, in my opinion, the oracle at Delphi, which is the voice of the gods. And that's the triangle. The oracle is that triangle, you see. So there you get the oracle, and it's sort of in the unknown world of the gods, you see. And there's poor Oedipus crawling on his hands and knees through his dreadful life, making mistakes, suffering, and all the rest of it. You see. Then, what is the inner cycle about? The funny lines. What is that about? I talked about there is the oracle, there is Oedipus. What's his inner lives about? Any idea?
So wouldn't that be his storyline of where he's going from thing to thing to thing, and how we would like to think learning from these
Ah, yeah.
encounters.
Well, almost, but it's I'll jump to the thing, don't want to
Go on then.
tantalize you.
Mhm.
You've disappeared. You've appeared again.
Sorry, yeah. My neighbour's cat's come in and I'm just trying to get it to go back out. So
All right.
likes to pop in
No,
now and then and say hello.
the inner lines are the audience. You see, in the Greek theater, the audience coming in knows the plot completely. It's part of the culture which believed in the gods. And so it's in the audience, this combination of the oracle and the suffering of Oedipus meet. It's in them.
Because they're not partaking, but well, they are partaking in the show, obviously, but
Yeah,
because they're feeling it, they're watching it.
that's right. This is what Aristotle was ancient effect about catharsis. It goes through something. And, this theater was one of the great innovations in Greece, particularly in Athens. And you could have thousands watching a production at a time. But also in this period, as Sophocles wrote, at a time of great trouble in Athens, of war and plague and illness and so on. And so this connects with, excuse me, what my friend Josiah has connected with. There's a man whose name I've forgotten, who practices what he calls the theater of war.
Mm-hmm.
And in this, he takes various classical works, what I mean might be Oedipus. But then the selection of the audience is critical, because they say, for example, he may pay it careful to have attention to bring together some veterans of a war. Because this is really what the sort of thing was happening in Athens. These people weren't just going to see some pretty thing on the stage. It was something to do with the whole meaning of their lives, what was happening in the culture around them. It was no joke. And then what he would do, they'd actually do it as not so much one, but as a reading. He does his own translation of the Greek and so on. And then with the important action comes in, the audience begins to talk about what they saw in the play. You see, and the action is then in them. So the key action is in the audience. In Aristotle, you get these symptoms, catharsis, the word catharsis being so cathartic, because people go through these emotional changes and meant it as an action which helped them to assimilate traumatic experience. It was actually a means to overcome trauma, to heal people. So this is where I think it's quite, my idea, fanciful as it is quite substantial. Because also that you can so easily talk about the play and say, well, that's what's on the stage or something. But you usually forget, in the audience is just somebody happened to come along to look at it. No, you make the audience critical of what the play is. What the audience is going through is the substance of the play. Otherwise, you don't do the play. It's not for nowadays it's for, celebrities to show off on stage, whatever. But in ancient Greece, it was for people to transform their experience, you see.
You're absolutely right about that, because people go to movies to see their favorite actors rather than go and see a movie because it's something they'd be interested in the storyline.
Yes.
Or they get told to go and, but they don't. I don't think people. I think the movies, it's not the same as watching an actual physical play in front of you, which is obviously what they'd be doing in days of old.
Sure.
So you're even more taken in when you've got that actor in front of you,
Yeah,
performing, and you're caught up in that performance. The movies you can
indeed.
easily be distracted and you don't take it in as well.
That's absolutely true. But let me make a jump here to, we mentioned movies. Take that up. You see, I've presented this picture of Greek drama and a great significance in my life because I came across it as a teenager at school. I was very lucky and amazed because I was in a science stream. We had to take humanities. By chance, I chose Greek civilization. Then I came across these plays and they were just like, phew. a total revelation to me, because they are so extraordinary, partly because they're primordial. Some of the earliest examples of theatre being born there. But what about the modern world? You see, in my book, I don't know if it was the original edition, but it's some other things I've added to it. I looked at films like Terminator.
Like being the added one, because I don't think I have that in my copy. I have one of the early editions.
Oh,
anyway, continue, please, with Terminator. We all like a bit of Arnie.
Oh, yes, and also the one which is the Total Recall, I think. And why those words? Let's go back to Terminator. You see, what was my take on the inner lines there? You see, and you have time travel. You see, the inner lines go this, which is not in linear time at all. And so you have a character, John O'Connor, in the Terminator, who does this. He's going across time. So I saw this role there as, because it's art, you see, it doesn't follow a formula. So you've got to get this archetypal metaphor, analog all the time. And it's there. Because you got somebody experiencing the sequence of events otherwise, not as the ordinary sequence of events. So you want, in watching that movie, to enjoy it, to be really with Sarah Connor and what she's going through and all the rest of it, you know, John O'Connor. And then it's referring to this background, and I'm not sure what the main triangle is there, is to do with the struggle between the soul of man and machines, and something I haven't put into words yet. But that thing about time travel struck me. Let's take it literally, because it seems that the inner lines go or not in linear time. Okay, let's take it like that. There's time travel, let's put it in time travel. And that's a modern take. That's how the moderns would do it. You see, take it literally, physically, materially, low down, if you like. But it seems to work. So there we have that. So that's what I love about this sort of thing. When Gurdjieff said it was kind of universal symbol, blah, blah, blah. You can find anything out of it. I think it's really true. And I heard it, try to invite people. It didn't really work. People didn't notice on me to say, look at all these different things. Look at prayer, look at cooking, look at marriage, look at music, look at science, whatever, where people are actually doing something, creating something, going through something, you know, transforming something, instead of this, are you number 2 or number 4? I mean, God, pathetic. You know,
it is, yes, because they're too busy trying to discover who they really are, instead of using the Gurdjieff work and learning what sort of person they are. They want to be told by a symbol. It's like, look at yourself and see what sort of person you are, and see that you're a different person, you know, with different people, as we know, you know, with different eyes and things.
yes, that sort of thing. It's,
But oh, sorry, go on.
no, I was just wondering in my mind, looking at time, go on to the, maybe it is the fourth component of this mishmash I'm making, because I'm really trying to, I find it's very difficult, because I have to assimilate, for example, all this recent research done on musical systems, and it's quite demanding of one's intellect and so on to keep it in mind what was happening, and this historical picture and many other factors, and hold them in mind. And there's another one bringing, which is in a way my starting point at the revision, which you've heard me speak about many times, and that is to say, well, the Enneagram has a long lost brother, or something, you know how to call it. He has relatives. Well, and I point then to try and indicate, instantiate what I'm talking about, to this famous idea, which I love so much, of ring composition. You would have heard me speak about it before.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before as well, because it made me look at books very differently.
Oh,
And you were saying, that's how people used to write in the past. And I have noticed, nowadays people don't write like that. So I've been trying to do it in a few of my own articles from the beginning, go to the story, and then bring it back round to the beginning again. But it seems to be working when I write about, say, somebody from the past, but I can't seem to make it work in my own fiction writing at the moment.
Okay.
But maybe I probably haven't explained it very well. So maybe you need to explain again of how it starts from, let's say, from an A goes to B, but then we're coming back to A again, but like a reverse process of it.
Reverse process, right? Yeah. Well,
It blew my mind when we discussed this last time, because I started noticing it in things. And at that time, I can't even remember who it was, but I was reading some not an old writing from the past. And it was like, oh, yeah, he's writing like that. I think it was Parsifal or something like that.
Parsifal over, my gosh.
Maybe
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't Parsifal or something like that. Because I know I was reading the middle.
And you can find on the web some modern examples, like there is on where you can find the ring composition of Harry Potter.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow, isn't it? It's nice.
Because I think that's a very esoteric book. I know they poo-poo J.K. Rowling these days, but I think with them books, she helped children learn this magic. And then when they get older, hopefully, they won't become just rational people. They'll remember the magic of Harry Potter, and that might show them the magic of the universe or something, and start looking at things a bit more differently, I'm hoping.
I do accord with that very, very much. I think she's a very responsible person, very insightful. And of course, such people do get attacked.
Yes.
By the rabble, because the rabble just want easy emotional images and beliefs and so on, and they don't really think about anything. So there's that. So it's not only, you can, well, as Mary Douglas, the scholars who's written about this, so he brings it up to date. She even brought it up to date in terms of detective stories. And that, what is that famous, strange work done in the 17th century, written by a vicar?
I was going to say, no, that's C.S. Lewis. I'm thinking of the wrong person.
No. It was about this. I don't know what it is, but anyway, it's kind of modified. But it's a prize because it's one of the examples where, like, the scholars started from, like her, where they started from is looking at things like in the Bible, certain chapters appear to be completely without any sense or structure, and it's just like, when they say, "Oh, poor old guys," they were ancient people, so they didn't know what they were doing. You see, kind of it was tossed away like that. This is just rubbish they're writing, and they didn't know how to write straight. But then when they got this key, they suddenly found it all fell into place. In fact, it had a very highly coherent structure to it. So, but she does point out you've got to allow for this creativity of the author, in a sense. In fact, you've got to find a way to make it work. So I believe then, again, believe that this was, well, I made two central steps. It's still very incomplete. One is to say that if, because the Enneagram was put together intelligently, so there ought to be other versions of it, or other applications of these patterns of thinking, maybe. And the second one was the coming across this fact that there was this quite long-lasting, coherent system of writing, because it's been traced at least from Homer, to modern times, almost, or at least the Middle Ages. But the interesting thing to point out, there's never been found a document which describes it. There are only examples of it being done.
Right, yeah, there's no academic, this is how we do a ring story book.
Exactly. Because people just learned in those days from, because they were immersed in a culture which did things a certain way, and they picked it up from, on the thing. But that's a very important thing in terms of things like the Enneagram and other kinds of systems. There's something in folklore embedded in usage, and people didn't, as you say, write down manuals or keys or explanations anyway. Explanations usually came later, after the system had been there. But what it meant was that the important thing was this thing about the informing. I talked about, the two laws. Gurdjieff had 3 and 7. I simply call them A and B. But A in his case was 3, and B was 7. And then 3 plus 7 equals 10. But also, going back to, and you mentioned Gurdjieff in this respect, rightly, there's a 3 times 3. You see, you get Enneagram, you see, the first law, 3, A is 3. 3 squared is 9. The 9 points the Enneagram. And I looked at it, I thought, okay, but everything else comes up there because that's 2 points of the Enneagram. That's the 9 points of the Enneagram. 3 and 7 equals 10. That's the number base, which is used in the calculation. Then, of course, that gives you the size of the second law, the B law, the unfolding law, which works out to be 7. Everything's just starting by giving A the value 3. And you can work out all the parameters of the Enneagram. I said, okay, let's look at this. So instead of taking A equals 3, let's take it 2. So instead of a triangle, we're going to have a line.
A line, yeah.
You see, it makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I've done that and go through all the mathematics that I have to deal with here. And what you get out is something which looks exactly like a tetrad. And you have top and the bottom, and left and right, and the left and right oscillate. This goes back and forth. Instead of the hexagon of the Enneagram, we just go tung, 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 like that. Mm-hmm. Then these two, top and bottom, have wonderful characters. The top is called, as you know, the latch is the Ouroboros. They come together at the end. But the bottom one is called the turn, because you get one direction down here, but then it turns and goes to another direction out there. And this gives very simple form, which can be used for many different purposes, but very simply. But then, you see, all we got, instead of the 2 points, 3 and 6 of the Enneagram, we've got the 1 point in the ring composition of the tetragram at the bottom, which is where the action is recreated. And I went off from then into all kinds of speculation. I thought, this is that's it, the devil.
Down below.
Down
Devil's
below.
always down below.
And it's what is the devil? It's like the counterpart of the top, the latch is the God Almighty, what's it be like. But you get into mystical mythology here. It's, God sends away Gurdjieff says, most beloved son, as far away as he could. And it becomes a symbol of rebellion. And I love the picture of Beelzebub rebelling against divine authority, you see, which makes something interesting happen.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's missing. So it's exactly the same. The figure in the middle is not a triangle, but just the line, but the line cuts the circle and means that there's something, a new action starts there, which is a reflection of the first action, which is exactly what you get in composition. It starts like this, then it inverts, reverses, and goes like that. You see, it's like equivalent to 2 octaves. It's beautiful. Well, then you can go back, and there's a way of looking at when A, the first law, is only 1, and that's quite interesting itself. And I tried to go higher, and I got A equals 4. So it's a 16 value thing, and I didn't get very far. It's just things to do with the calendar and the seasons, the 4 seasons, and the months, and 12 months of the year, and all this kind of thing comes into it. So there really is a basis for saying that there is could be a whole family of relatives for the Enneagram. But people would ask me, what's the point? What can you do with that?
So in a way, it's kind of like the Platonic solids. There's a group, a family of them, but we're having a family of Enneagrams, but you're still working on the designs.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I'll buy to that. I think it's probably enough for today. But you see, you're just always trying to say, look, these Gurdjieff and his friends were actual people, quite intelligent people, but let's put aside notions of this supernatural knowledge or anything like that. They were thinking about a problem, about communicating ideas and doing it. How would they go about it? And I think this is a much more healthy attitude. And I was astonished when people go on and on about ancient wisdom and so on. Not that there wasn't ancient wisdom, but it's made vague, and which loses the point. Because the ancients did have remarkable achievements, like in mathematics, very remarkable ones. Like thousands of years before the Greeks, they were doing mathematics and architecture and building and all kinds of extraordinary things. And I often go back to Picasso, when he first saw the art of the Ice Age, going back 20,000, 30,000 years ago, he said, we haven't advanced a step.
No. If anything, we've lost stuff. Which is why Ouspensky called it originally his book Fragments of a Lost Teaching, wasn't it?
I always love that title, Fragments of an Unknown Teaching. That is, I like it. But he thought he could fit it all together in a nice system, and that's where he blew
That's the intellect only, isn't it? He wasn't using all his centers.
Yes, it's in a way it's a creative act to put it together, and it's not finding the answer at all. It's finding an answer for certain people at a certain time, a certain set of circumstances, which means they can do something with it. And that's the important thing. This game, my writing up the Enneagram to make this is for people to do something with, to be creative with, not to just wallow in.
Look at me, I know this, that kind of thing. What are people doing with the knowledge? Turning it into wisdom.
Exactly the way to get it. I think there's a general movement, we'll wrap it up here, brother, about people turning away from the old idea, the esoteric, and I've always had this tension in my life. You're supposed to become a believer in some kind of occult energies or something, whatever.
I'm a believer, Tony, but I'm always happy to hear your views.
Okay, I know you're the best. You're the best believer I know. No, but I'm trying to relate the esoteric to simple things like professionals in earlier cultures who knew things like mathematics or music or whatever it was. They, as we know in prison, they would always try to protect their secrets of their trade and not make it public, because it was their way of having a position, authority, and money.
Yes.
Well, and so I think that's one of the strong sources of the code of esoteric. They kept secret knowledge because it meant they had some power. And I like the story, I think I've told you before, it's a 19th century story of blacksmiths, where there was this critical action for a blacksmith, which is quenching steel. You plunge it,
into the water, yeah, steam.
But then there's always this kind of atmosphere around it. What is the secret of quenching the steel? Now, the blacksmiths, what they would spread rumors about the composition of the liquid into which the steel was plunged, including such obvious things as is what they pissed into, but all kinds of magical things. It was a total distraction.
Yes.
Because the important thing about quenching steel, the one important ingredient?
Stand back and don't burn yourself. No, I don't, but I'm sure that, yeah.
It's the temperature of the steel when you put it into the liquid, which you assessed by its color. So that was what was important. But it meant that the blacksmiths could pretend to have a secret and get people to work for them for a longer period instead of going off on their own. because that was a tension with anybody with an apprentice. They go off and take his work, this kind of thing. But I think these practical economic things played a part in the esoteric. Well, because you private knowledge, and because you get the negative extremes, the foundation who keep knowledge from the people, like they don't show people a complete movement.
Mm-hmm.
Because it gives them some power over people.
Exactly, yes.
And this is just wickedness. This is plain wickedness. Now in this age where it's like, I love that book which had a title like, reality ain't what it used to be.
Though I was thinking, actually, while you was talking, and when we was talking about the drama and how people used to see it live and look at the actors up there,
yeah.
It would also be a different vibration for people if you and me were live somewhere that people could come and attend. That would be a different feeling for them. If we were live somewhere, if we were like, we had a venue and we were talking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It would be, it's nice that you're all watching us on this YouTube channel, but it'd be even better if we were in live on stage.
All right.
You would feel different.
So you're hoping to have an experience of in next month in Claremont to do enacting all kinds of things. To complete it, we do need an audience. It really is true. And
so how do people find out about Claremont then? Is it on your diversity website now, or do people just email you?
Yes, it is. Yeah. It's I think it's there. And we sent round, email,
round robin
email lists we have, all the ones we have, and we have like Jessica and I we did a conversation and got a small part of it, about 5 minutes, as I was talking about it. We try to make it like that because it seemed to be appropriate not to have a kind of, this is what you get, A, B, C, D, D, but having this conversation which is trying to find its way in front of people. And I think it just says, when it's ready, I'll send a copy to you. And he's completed it. But this is, again, just like he said about Gurdjieff, he goes on and on about it. He said, years ago, he read Beelzebub from the author. It says, read it 3 times, the second time as if to another person. This is what people don't do usually when they're reading Beelzebub. They are reading a text. So their attention is in the world of the text and not in the world of the people. And you can hear the difference. You know the difference.
Yes. And I've had people say to me, I've got no one to read to. Read to yourself. Your soul is listening. Your other eyes are listening.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. And I used to record yourself, whatever it means. Make it happen. It's a wonderful breakthrough, but it's in abstract terms, it's so simple. As you go from this world, you're just reading the text. It's just you're just one. At least you get another person there. It's 2. You see, and you get more than that. You get 3, and so on. And this, I don't know how to explain it. There's this horrible thing of the reduction of people just to being single entities and just with some so-called consciousness and will, but single entities. So much of the work has got poisoned by that because it's all put in that context of this solitary individual. I think, is my opinion.
No, it is. I think that's also why perhaps people watch, our shows. Hopefully, this is why, and because we're not saying this is the way to do it. We're trying to encourage them to go and read the original writings, or
And also, we're 2 different people. You see, as you say, you're a believer in some of the stuff. I'm not. Great. I'm happy. You're happy.
Yes, and we can still have a conversation.
Still have a conversation. More people in the world would do this kind of sort of thing. So here, coming back to Enneagram, I hope I can bring this. It's so tedious because some of the stuff really has to be got worked out properly, but it's not like a formula. I know people written books about Enneagram, worked out all the numbers of systems, the DNA, the whatever it is, the octaves and all the rest of it, but It's like Bennett said, it's this incredible balance in it. Not incredible, there's important balance in it. You have things which appear different, like these numbers all around. You look at the numbers and say, well, look at number 3. It means 3 things, 3. But it doesn't. It can have a totally different meaning in the qualitative sense, and that's the art of reading something like the Enneagram. You can have both the quantitative and the qualitative, and keeping the balance between them which is the art of it. There's several examples in Enneagram in the 30s. Working with doctors, they try to work on what Gurdjieff was saying about the physiological and psychological system. You see, when they found it, they shouldn't pin it down. And so the Enneagram, final point, comes out and really has these 2 sides, the right side and left side facing it. And Bennett talks about how you've got to kind of see yourself inside and turn it around, which he did. And so I think it's a very good case for treating it then, the Enneagram, as a sort of model of the 2 sides of the brain.
The left hemisphere and right hemisphere.
Yes. But the right-hand side of the Enneagram is to do with the material, linear, fixed world. The left hand is to do with the more spiritual, open, transformative world. And so what's Gilchrist, who one of the great writers on this today, has brought out about the 2 sides, you can bring it to the Enneagram. But then I think, well, I can visit. What about the corpus callosum? That's the nerves between the 2 sides of the brain. The corpus callosum, I think. Presto, the inner lines of the Enneagram. There you are. Almost physically represented it, you see. And it is, you see why this over here and this over here. So that's dealing with the ostensible, and that's dealing with the implicate, the subtle, with the crossover in the middle. And the art is in this 3rd dimension. Ta-da!
Yeah, that's as you're saying it, it's all making sense. I'm just thinking about it, and also because of them lines coming across, they develop as we're growing and becoming a teenager, and then into our 20s. They don't really finish fusing until we're in our late 20s, do they?
No.
Which is a very important time as well.
Indeed. So maybe we go on developing. There's a lot of very interesting people around now. Sometimes they don't come under easy labels like Gurdjieff or Forceway or Steiner or whatever it is, or even science. Or there's just a lot of interesting people around.
There is, yes, because I'm quite thankful. A lot of my subscribers on my channel, if I put a show out and they've seen it, perhaps someone else speak about this, but from a different point of view or whatever, they always give me references, which I do follow up, because I need to learn things as well. I need people to point me in directions I'd never have thought of. And I also read people I don't agree with, so because it helps me understand where they're coming from.
That's right. Yes, agreement and disagreement are very much overrated. And just say, it's a spark in this, somewhere for me. And it's up to me to make sense of it. It's not up to the person to put it into language I like, which would be a waste of time. Because it's got to be what's genuine for them.
Mm-hmm.
Right, my love. Here we are.
Yes, well, I think we should bring it to an end. So your claimant is being advertised on your website, or
hopefully I'll check it out.
Which is the diversity one. If not, they should just get in touch with you.
Yes.
I have a website, debbie-eliot.co.uk, and I've got a few things coming up over the year. Great. Of various appearances at places.
Oh, the appearances of Debbie.
But thank you very much for this, Tony. It's always a pleasure chatting to you.
And you, because it's so human. It's just, we just have a good time, that's all.